The War Photographer by Carol Ann Duffy. First of all, I'd like you to think about the last time you've watched or read the news. How many war photographs did you see? What were they like? Do you think that the photographs published by mainstream media accurately reflects the horrors of war? How would you feel as a war photographer? I'd like you to brainstorm those points around your copy of The War Photographer, preferably near the title. Okay, let's move on. So, The War Photographer was written by Carol Ann Duffy. Here's a bit of biographical information for you. I think we should focus on the fact that one of her closest friends, Don McCullin, was a very famous war photographer, and his pictures have created some powerful images of the suffering that war can cause. So, why is that significant in reference to the war photographer? Well, obviously, you'll need to read the whole poem first, so please pause this screencast now and read the whole poem and annotate as much as you can by yourself, and then once you've annotated the poem, come back to the screencast. Thank you. Right, The War Photographer. Here's a basic summary of the poem. In this poem, Duffy describes the experience of someone whose job it is to witness terrible crimes against humanity and record them for us, many miles away, through photographs. The poem seems to bitterly question how we react to disasters in other countries and the media's control of the way in which war is presented in newspapers. So, stanza 1. Let's focus on the very last line of stanza 1. Belfast, Beirut, Phnom Penh, all flesh is grass. These are all capital cities, Belfast, Beirut, Phnom Penh, that have suffered greatly from the effects of war. But why has Carol Ann Duffy chosen to use short sentences in this line? Okay, think about that and jot it down in your copy of the poem. Let's move on to a detailed focus of stanza 1. Please refresh your memories as to the definition of sibilance. It has been used heavily in this stanza. With spools of suffering set out in ordered rows, the only light is red and softly glows. I'd like you to find the definitions of these words and write down their connotations. Number 1, spools. Number 2, intone a mass. Obviously, we have religious connotations through the word church. I'd like you to ask yourself about the narrative. What kind of narrative voice can we hear in terms of the tense and the is it a negative tone or a positive tone? The speaker, is it a detached speaker? Why did Carol Ann Duffy choose not to write this poem in the first person as a war photographer, from the perspective of a war photographer? Jot down your answers on your poem or on some lined paper. So ask yourself, why has sibilance been used? Don't just spot language techniques, that will not get you marks. You have to explain why they've been used and how they affect the reader and yourself. So let's name the language technique used in All Flesh is Grass. What are the modern connotations of this statement? It's a biblical saying too. The phrase is interpreted to mean that human life is transitory. I'd like you to consider the imagery used in the following quote, all flesh is grass. Why does the last line in the stanza repetitively use full stops and short sentences? Why did Carol Ann Duffy choose to use the simile which links the war photographer and a priest preparing to intone a mass? Research a priest preparing to intone a mass if you don't have much understanding of it already. And then come back to this. Okay, let's move on to stanza 2. So, professional versus being personal. He has a job to do. That very first line in stanza 2 suggests the complication, the trauma that the photographer is witnessing, and how the photographer has become desensitized to the suffering because he recognizes that it's his job. He has to do it. So there's a sense of emotional detachment. There is a sense of ambiguity about the way in which the word solutions has been used here. It could simultaneously refer to the act of war and any people trying to find solutions for the act of war, and it could also be referring to the solutions used for photographs in the development of photographs. Which definition or interpretation do you think is far more suited? I'd like you to think about the word slop and why it has been used after the word solutions. If we were to follow the definition of solutions as a word which represents people's attempts to stop war, that would suggest that they have failed, because it says here solutions slop in a tray, metaphorically speaking. But if we are to take this literally in the sense that the solutions for the photographs slop in the tray, then that's a different meaning as well. Okay, next I'd like you to name the technique used in the following line. Line number 12, running children in a nightmare heat. Explain, most importantly, why it's been used here. So, let's move on to another question about this poem for our analysis. Home again to ordinary pain, which simple weather can dispel. Rural England. Does the speaker seem to be sympathetic towards a particular cause or group of people? What's the speaker's implicit message through this quote? Rural England, home again to ordinary pain, which simple weather can dispel. Look out for and quote examples of contrasting imagery between the mundane life of the people in England with the children in foreign lands running for their lives in war. At war. Okay. Let's move on to stanza 3 now. Please make sure that you're highlighting and underlining and annotating your own copy of the poem. Let's look over here. So, a stranger's features faintly start to twist before his eyes, a half-formed ghost. Name the language technique used. Ask yourself, why has it been used? How could it affect the reader's feelings? Remember, the main topics, themes approached in this poem is the media's control of war and the horrors of war. Okay? He remembers the cries of this man's wife. So, where's the emotive language and why has it been used? There are several different examples of emotive language being used throughout the poem. Remember to underline or highlight the emotive language words used in the poem as a whole. So, how is memory presented here? A stranger's features faintly start to twist before his eyes. A half-formed ghost, he remembers the cries of this man's wife. Okay, is it a positive or a negative thing? Why? Okay, here we go. Next quote to focus on is the term foreign dust, the phrase, as it were. This refers to a war poem by Rupert Brooke, The Soldier. That poem is a patriotic poem which showcases the glory of war and the honour of dying for one's country. Do you think that the poet, or shall we say the speaker, in this poem sees the glory of war, sees the honour of dying for one's country? Or does this speaker poem present the horrors of war and the way in which it can't be represented well through the media in England? Okay. Stanza 4. states here 100 agonies in black and white. Black and white photographs are often thought to be the most powerful images of war. Look at that phrase, black and white, from which his editor will pick out 5 or 6 for Sunday's supplement. So, black and white also has connotations of being very clear. There's no doubt. Do you think that you can present war without being biased through the form of media newspapers? So typo there. Is a supplement important? So, the Sunday supplement is a regular additional magazine section placed in a Sunday newspaper. So the images, the horrific images of war, are presented as a supplement in a magazine section that people might not even read because it's an additional section. Okay? So a lack of importance is presented for these war photographs. So why does the speaker refer to pre-lunch beers and a bath? What is the speaker suggesting about the English lifestyle in comparison to the wars in foreign countries? What is the speaker suggesting about the readers of the newspaper, the observers of the photographs? Investigate the emotive language used here. Does the speaker aim to show our sense of grief in regards to the war? The reader's eyeballs prick with tears between the bath and pre-lunch beers. So, overall, the poem's form and structure. The poem has a rhyme scheme of A, B, B, C, D, D, quite monotonous. And it is a sestet, written in a sestet. What is that? Well, 6 lines in each stanza, and there are 4 stanzas. So, a good poem to compare and contrast with The War Photographer is Prayer Before Birth. They both deal with a sense of pessimism towards life, humanity, and suffering. Extension tasks. Please watch the following YouTube clip. It will show you another teacher explaining the poem in detail as well. Let's focus on critical interpretations. One of the marking criteria is your ability to consider different interpretations and to develop your own opinion, clearly, of the poem's main meanings. Investigate this critic's statement and write down whether you agree or disagree on your poem with a quote to support your point. And that's it. Good luck with your revision.